So I'm very happy to be with you, although a bit remotely today. And indeed, I just wanted to have an introduction on why BNP Paribas has the need of a multi-governance and how we have been very happy to try and implement this multi-governance in a tool using Yield Solution. So I'm going to share just one slide, if you allow me. Here it is. So in fact, I see a tool like a model. It has to represent a certain reality, the best it can, not the reverse. We are not trying to bend the reality to try and fit in a tool. So we were looking for a tool that could represent our reality. And our reality at BNP Paribas is a multi-governance setup. Here I presented on the slide only the traditional models. And the governance for traditional model obeys different constraints, different regulation, and you're dealing with some so different types of model that actually the model risk management governance has adapted to them. So for example, on the center, you have the traditional risk models, to which we have added some compliance model relatively recently. But then on the insurance side, because BNP Paribas has a big insurance subsidiary, Cardiff, in fact, the regulation is very different and they have their own governance. On top of that, you have the valuation governance that is very close or very integrated within the finance governance. And then you have ALMT. So this part would be pretty easy, so to speak, to represent in a tool if there was not a number of things that would cut across. And for example, you have the North America governance. We used to call it US governance, but because it answered the regulation in the US that every model used in the US have to obey a regulation called SR 11.7, we have recently extended it to E23, which is a very similar regulation in Canada. And the fact that you have something across is already a bit of a struggle when you want to put that in a tool, i.e. you will have a choice either to have something completely separate and a lot of checking or synchronization or replication, or you would have a lot of duplication of work between the two. Here I illustrated what we call a stream. It represents the credit model, which we are trying to treat seamlessly between the group governance and the US governance. And recently, AI has come in. And with AI, the problem is that it cuts across, again, everything, and in a very free-form format. I say free-form because on top of that, you have a bit of uncertainty on the scope. If you look at the EU AI Act in Europe, we still don't know whether regular regression are going to be in scope or not. So that's why when you try to add that, on top of which AI, you tend to speak of use case, not really of models. Or when you talk of models, people understand something different. That's the type of a bit complex reality that we wanted to fit in the tool. So I just have one example. I took a credit model, which is initially a group credit model, but it happens to be used in the US and Canada. And then it has an AI component. And suddenly you have something that is in at least 3 governance. And that's where we would like to try to avoid either very tedious reconciliation or duplication of work and the risk of divergence in the representation of that model in the various governance. So basically, that was my illustration of why we want a tool that can adapt to our reality. The other thing that we want is we want to be able to speak to someone who understands our problems. And we were very happy to see that within Yields, with the background of the number of people, they understand us. So it facilitates a lot the exchange. It facilitates a lot our way to be able to configure their solution to our needs. And that's it, yes, that was my introduction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nathalie. Maybe before we continue, a quick question to the audience. So as Nathalie explained, at BNP, there are multiple governance frameworks, and that leads to a certain complexity, of course, when managing model risk and AI risk in general. So from the people here from different organizations, how many of you have more than one governance framework? Okay, so I see, let's say, a handful of people. I think Ratul also has probably more than one governance framework. Anyone more than 5? Okay, so in that case, Nathalie, you seem to be a little bit of the outlier here, with I think 14 governances, if I'm not mistaken. So indeed, quite a lot of complexity. And maybe to the people who answered yes or positive on the first question, like to what extent are there similarities between the different governances? Are they like totally distinct, or is there a certain amount of overlap either in the models that are being used or the use cases that are being built or in the processes? So maybe like who sees a certain amount of overlap in these multi-governance setup? Okay. Only, again, a few, indeed. So it is indeed a very specialized problem simultaneously. If you look at how things evolve, model risk management, you have extremely heavily regulated models, such as what Philippe also explained, IRB models, very good example. With all the sprawling AI systems, you can't apply the same rigor to those AI systems, right? So having at least 2 different approaches to the same problem is extremely important. And maybe on that topic, Nathalie, could you comment a bit on how at BNP then AI governance differs from more classical model risk management?
So in fact, what we noticed with AI is that a number of teams have to work together to assess collectively the risk of AI. So you have a model dimension, definitely, but not only. And with AI moving into Gen AI and agentic AI, more and more the boundaries are a bit blurred between classical model risk and other types of operational risk. So for example, if you look at hallucination, basically you're going to look at it from a cyber point of view. You're also going to look at it from a model point of view, i.e. how much the output of the AI system can mislead the user. But you can look at it from many different angles. You also have your data protection officer, which is interested whether because of one effect or another, maybe you can reveal some data you should not reveal. And then legal will add their intellectual property dimension. So what we realize is that, in fact, it's not that model risk is very different for AI or for classical model, but classical model, they tend to have one unique purpose, so to speak. And they usually produce some kind of estimate, which is, by the way, the definition of a model in the US. Whereas, as we move into Gen AI, agentic AI, you can very much have use of AI that are more to streamline a process, to automate a task, and then the notion of model is a bit more remote. So we have felt the need to work together with operational risk and other team, because there is some kind of continuous or collective effort around that. And from a tool perspective, it means that when we are looking at the AI use case, so first, in the setup, we can have an object that looks like an AI use case in one governance and a model in another governance, and they are still connected. And second, we are trying to connect this AI use case with other systems in the bank that are dealing with operational risk, for example, whether third-party, data protection, or else, so that we can collectively share the inventory, but every team can have their share of the management of the risk of AI. Is it clear enough, Jos?
I believe so, but let me check with the audience or with the panel. So indeed, so you are integrating with different systems to be able to somehow centralize the information. Simultaneously, you are also doing this to be able to avoid duplication in the work that needs to be done. Now, maybe it helps if we could take a concrete example, for instance, like if you have this concept of an AI factory, and then you have the AI use cases that are created from that. Maybe it's worth to give that example to show how, say, governance is managed across those two different levels.
Sure. So we have our AI use case inventory, but as you mentioned, we have a few factories, i.e. some teams who are creating a large number of AI use cases with the same bricks, which we can call platform or AI bricks or AI services. So the way we are trying to represent that is we do have an AI use case inventory. It is a bit of the norm, even though it's evolutive. And we use the dependencies to connect these AI use case to these platforms. And the platforms, to be able to understand each other between the people looking at model risk and the people looking at operational risk and the people looking at IT, the platforms, they have an owner, and we are asking the owner of the platform to list all the components of the platform. We do it that way because we believe that an AI use case owner does not know necessarily all the different IT components that are hidden behind his use case. So we have this intermediate object, the platform, so that on the IT side, they know when they change a component and they can know with the dependencies what are the use cases that are using their IT asset. From an operational risk point of view, we are also making the link between this platform and IT asset and the process that the AI use case supports. And from an AI use case user or owner, they only has to tell us to which type of large object or platform is use case is connected, has been built with. It does not have to have the tedious task to tell us each time a small IT asset is changing. So for example, let's say that we have a Gen AI factory inside the bank. It means that a number of data scientists or a number of users can very easily build a use case with this factory, but this factory contains many models and it can evolve very fast, and IT can decide to put a new model in place and remove on. And if you have a 70 use case built on this, we don't want to ask the 70 owner of the use case to tell us each time one of the model changes. So it allows to basically streamline a bit the process so that I know when a model has changed and which use case it affects. IT knows when they can decommission a model because it's no longer used. And the operational risk guy have the global picture of what's going on for all the AI system that supports a given process. It seems like easy. We had to think on how to set it up. But if you think about it and if you have 1,000 use case, it's very impractical to ask each and every of the use case owner to tell us when everything that they don't even see is changing behind their use case. It's as if you were asking the owner of all the cars of a certain brand to tell us individually when maybe a part of this of their engine has been enhanced, or to tell us worse if it's a Tesla when what is behind the upgrade that they've applied to their car. So we are trying really to streamline that and to make sure that we have the minimum information that are input by the right person in the system. Otherwise, we are afraid to have a big disquality of data with contradictory information everywhere in the system.
Okay, thank you, Nathalie. I think there is one question from Sébastien.
Yes, Nathalie, can we actually relate this notion of a platform that you say is coming from the factory to the wording of AI system being used by the EU AI Act?
So the platform is not really, doesn't correspond to any specific definition. For us, the AI system, if you mean it in the sense of the EU AI Act, is very close from an AI use case. Why? Because in fact, if you look at the EU AI Act, you can't really classify it. You can't really classify a model on itself. You have to know that it is implemented and to what, for what it is going to be used. So AI system, AI use case, we consider it's very close notion. It's you're using an AI implementation to a certain purpose. What I call a platform would be these generic components that are used to build a use case. It's not something that exists in the regulation, it's just something that we felt is needed between the AI use case or AI system on the one hand, and all the series of IT assets that can exist in an institution, just to allow a user to point us in the right direction of what is it that his use case has been built upon. Is it clear?
Yes, it is. And I think what you do with creating a platform to be able to make it easier to create AI use cases and manage them is a little bit aligned with what Ratul earlier today mentioned about democratizing AI governance, because the heavy lifting is done at the platform level, and there is a much light touch approach to the governance of the individual AI use cases that are being created from that platform. And I think many organizations are playing with, for instance, Copilot or Gemini, creating gems, and these are all the same ideas. You have a platform that allows you to create use cases. If you can somehow strictly govern the platform, then the amount of work that you need to do at the use case level is a lot more reduced.
The productivity tool like Copilot are very special case because you don't want each and every user to declare each time they use it for a different purpose. So we have declared on their behalf a number of generic use cases like translation, summarization, and from a model risk management perspective, we look at it that way. We are trying to assess the performance of this generic usage, as opposed to asking each and every user in BNP Paribas to declare exactly all the use they are using it for and try to go through a classical model risk governance. Now, the platform can be bricks that are not directly usable because there is a big effort on our side to mutualize IT components, to just have something much more optimal, to reduce the number of possible IT components. When it's GenAI, to optimize the production in terms of GPUs. And that's what we call the platform also, the components that are made available to data scientists to build their use case.
Yes, exactly. And maybe one last question about then the multi-governance setup. So could you maybe illustrate? So there are a number of items or actions that are important in a multi-governance setup. So first of all, if I am responsible for an AI use case, and I only see the inventory and the world from the lens of the AI governance itself, then I will see the inventory in a particular way. If on the other hand, I'm part of, say, the US governance, as in Nathalie's example, then I might see the world slightly differently. And then there is, say, the overarching view for someone who needs the overview of all models across the different governances itself. So what are, according to you, Nathalie, then the main aspects of this multi-governance setup? What are the key actions that are important to make this work?
You need to have a global framework where you determine very precisely what you impose everywhere. What are the common goods? You can look at it like you have a building and you have many flats. In a building, you have only one lift. You don't build a lift per flat, otherwise it's going to be a bit complicated. So the people, they share a number of things in common, and this imposed, and you know it when you buy the flat. But then they have the freedom to declare the flat the way they want, so that's their space of freedom. But then if you are an inspector and you want to know whether electricity is consistent, you need to be able to check in each and every flat that they have not done something very weird with electricity. So when you combine all of that, when we build the multi-governance tool, we declare pretty soon what is common that it will be imposed to everybody. Then we can give the keys to a number of admin for their own governance, their flat. But then they know that we still need to check once in a while. They are dependent on some super admin because there are certain things they are not allowed to do. Otherwise, it would prevent building the global inventory. So we are trying to combine the benefit of having a global inventory, having some common fields that allow us to have the global picture, and give a certain freedom to people who want to view their governance the way they want.
Thank you. And then maybe, because we have other panelists, of course, a quick question to you, Leonardo, first. You have presented the PF use case last year. When you look at this project here, like, do you see any similarities? What is different? What goes smooth? What maybe is a challenge? Could you comment on that?
Yes, of course. And thank you, Jos. I think the main message I'd like to transmit to you here is that the fact of implementing a multi-governance model risk management tool imposes the discussion of concepts between the actors. So as Nathalie was saying, not everybody would have the same notion of AI use cases, AI platforms, models. And this discussion takes effort, and it's not simple, but it's very, very rich. I think it's a good opportunity to align concepts within the organization, and we don't have often that opportunity. So going into a tool requires standardization, which is a good opportunity to discuss concepts. And to answer your question, within PF, we were working on a single governance, and we were just implementing existing process to the tool. And with the group, we are also creating new process and standardizing processes. So it requires further discussion, but as I said, it's another opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And that actually aligns a bit with also what Philippe mentioned, right? This was in the context of validation, but the big challenge is not so much the automation, it's the changing all the processes and aligning everything. And this is like the multi-dimensional example of the same problem, I guess. And maybe in order to kind of organize, say, this high-dimensional space, BNP uses a concept of a triplet. So maybe, Yann, you want to explain how that works?
Yes, thank you very much. So we were talking a lot about models, objects, etc. But multi-governance is based on the notion of triplets. So the basic object is a model, but a triplet is the notion of the governance the model is part of, the model itself, plus the usage the model has. So each object in multi-governance frameworks is a triplet, so governance, object, plus usage. And then information is declared at triplet level, and there are propagation rules that can be established to say this attribute is valid for, let's say, all usages of this model per governance or things like that. So this is how triplet works in multi-governance. This is how triplet helps implementing multi-governance.
So any questions from the audience? Ephraim.
I wanted to ask the panel whether this multi-governance setup is also an opportunity to come up with model risk aggregate views.
Who wants to take the question? Nathalie, you want to answer?
Ephraim, you're a bit in advance. We are trying to set up first the model risk as we know it. But in truth, you're right that we have, for example, a model risk appetite statement with RAS metrics for model risk, and we are not very satisfied at this stage. It's a bit indirect. We are not looking at trying to measure the model risk. We are just looking at trying to detect things that go wrong, like, for example, too many recommendations that are past due on a model or things like that. So once we have digested the multi-governance setup and whatever, we want to go back, because we will have this global picture on how we can try to have something comparable in the various governance that I've shown you to have this notion of aggregate model risk. What we used to have in a very old tool is something that was showing already the dependencies between the different models. So it's something that is available in the solution. Huh? And when you have dependencies of the nature of feeder model, we can show the dependencies between the model. You have that dimension because when you add model risk in a chain, it increases. But the other dimension, which is how do you compare the level of model risk in valuation model, risk model, AI use case? We have not yet found really the solution. But indeed, at one point, we would like to replace our risk appetite metrics with something that would be a bit a more direct measure of model risk and coming from this wealth of the information that we would have gathered in one tool.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
I had a question related to the triplet concept to understand because, okay, one part governance, the object can be the model and then the use case, the context where the model is used. So there are also combinations where you have multiple governance for the same object and one or more than use cases. So how you then track?
A use case is represented by a triplet. Use case is a triplet, and the last element of the triplet is a usage. For example, basic example, in the context of credit, you can have a usage which is RWA computation, and another usage which is IFRS 9. Just to precise the fact that. Okay. So there.
So actually, you will have multiple triplets. Like suppose you have indeed two usages, IFRS, and then you have another governance that uses the same model. The model itself is a single object, but how it looks will depend on the governance that you are looking from which you are looking at it, basically. So you will see. Suppose you have 4 triplets, 2 of them in different governances and the others have different usages. You will see 4 items in the inventory if you have access to both governances, but the way in which the model itself looks, which is actually a single object, will differ. Other questions? If not, then I would like to thank all our panelists, and yeah, I'm sure this is going to be an interesting journey to further continue rolling out that concept. Thank you.